Example 1 says use synthetic substitution to evaluate the polynomial for x. So what it's wanting us to do is figure out what f of 3 is. And normally when we do that, we fill in 3 for all of our x's and get an answer. But the idea that we want to look at here is that if I take 3 and I do synthetic division with my problem, keeping in mind that there's no x squared here, so we're going to have to put in a 0 at x squared. Then what happens is my remainder is going to be what f of 3 is. So if I work out this synthetic division, I drop the 2, 3 times 2 is 6, negative 5 plus 6 is 1, 3 times 1 is 3, 0 plus 3 is 3, 3 times 3 is 9, negative 4 plus 9 is 5, 3 times 5 is 15, 8 plus 15 is 23. What this is saying is that f of 3 equals our remainder, which our remainder is the last number, so it equals 23. So when it asks you to use synthetic substitution, it's asking you to do synthetic division, and your answer is the last number, which is the remainder. The other thing that we're going to do in this section is we're going to use synthetic division to factor. And so what they're going to do is they're going to tell us either an answer or a factor, and they're going to ask us to factor the polynomial completely. So we're going to, if we have x cubed, we're going to end up with like 3 parentheses because we would have 3 different answers. So they're telling us x plus 4 is one of those parentheses, and we are going to figure out what the other parentheses are. So if I have x plus 4 and I'm doing synthetic division, remember we set it equal to 0 and solve to figure out what to put in our synthetic division box. So I'm going to put a negative 4, then I'm going to put 1, negative 1, negative 14, and 24. So I do synthetic division, and because this should factor in, I should get a 0 for my remainder. If I don't, then I've done something wrong. So I get 0 here at the end. If I start with x cubed, remember that my answer starts with x squared. So I'm going to write out x squared minus 5x plus 6, and then I'm going to factor this to find these other 2 factors, because I can look at this and I can say, what do I multiply together to get 6 that will add to get negative 5? I'd have to pick negative 3 and negative 2. So those are my other 2 factors, as well as x plus 4, so I can just write x plus 4 next to it. I know x plus 4 was a factor because they gave it to me. I know these 2 are because I factored the result of my synthetic division. So this is my answer. Example 3, we have x plus 2, and we're going to do the same thing that we just did. So I'm going to subtract the 2 over to solve this, to start my synthetic division. Now, since this is x to the 4th, we should end up with 4 sets of parentheses. So I'm going to do 1, negative 1, negative 7, 1, and 6. So you do have to remember how to do synthetic division for this section. So if you're having problems with it, definitely ask your teacher for help. Now I started with x to the 4th, which means that I would start my answer with x to the 3rd. This is 1x to the 3rd minus 3x squared minus 1x, which we don't need the 1 there, plus 3. And to factor this, since there are 4 terms, I have to factor by grouping. So I look at these 2 terms. I can take out an x squared, and when I do, I'm left with x minus 3. Then I look at these 2 terms and I say, well, they don't have anything in common, but right now I have the wrong sign, so I'm going to take out a negative 1 so that it changes this sign to a positive x, and it changes this sign to a negative 3. because what we want to have is our parentheses matching up. They're both x minus 3's now. And then I write what's left over in my other parentheses. So then I go through and I say, well, I said I needed 4 factors, and the one I started with was x plus 2. We just found x minus 3 and x squared minus 1. So anything that's squared, we need to take farther, like x squared minus 1. I can factor that, because I can say what multiplies together to get -1, that when I add it together will go away, so I don't have a middle term. That'll be +1 and -1. So that's how I end up with 4 factors there. And that would be my answer on that one. One more. So I'm going to set this equal to 0, add 5 to both sides. Get x equals 5, so that's what I'm going to do synthetic division with. And just like on the last one, we started with x to the 4th, so this will be x cubed when we write our answer. And then if I have 4 terms, I want to factor by grouping. These have a 2x squared in common. If I take 2x squared out of the first one, that's x. If I take 2x squared out of 2x squared, it doesn't go away completely. I have to put a 1 there, okay, to show that there was something there. Like, think about it like if I divide by 2x squared, what's left, it'd cancel out and it'd be 1. Then I do, well, there's nothing I can take out of x plus 1, so I'm going to do a +1. X plus 1, my parentheses match, which is fantastic. Then I write what's left over, the 2x squared plus 1. The factor they gave us was x minus 5, and we want to deal with the x squared here in the middle. Now that's not going to factor, so we either need to try setting it equal to 0 and solving, or if there was another term in the middle, we would have to use the quadratic formula. So this one will be able to solve by subtracting 1 and dividing by 2. We get x equals -1. X squared equals -1/2. So I square root and get x equals plus or minus, because I took the square root. Because it's a negative underneath, the square root of 1/2, the square root of 1 on top we can take, but I'm just going to leave it as square root of 1/2. And so this parentheses splits up into x plus I square roots of 1/2 and x minus I square roots of 1/2. Or you could have written that in the other order, but that's how this splits up, because that's the answers I got. So if I put in these other factors, this is that completely factored. So there we go.